In the spring of 1954, in a hangar at Farnborough, a team of British engineers built a steel tank around a nearly new airliner, filled it with water, and set about destroying it. Not testing it, destroying it. Pumps raised the pressure inside the cabin and dropped it again, over and over, day and night, each cycle standing in for one flight. They intended to keep going until the aircraft tore itself apart, because the only way left to find out what was killing the Comet was to kill one themselves somewhere they could stand and watch. They were doing this to the most advanced aircraft in the world. 2 years earlier, the de Havilland Comet had made Britain the undisputed leader in civil aviation. The first jet airliner in service anywhere, flying higher, faster, and more smoothly than anything else in the skyline, and in the space of 3 months, 2 of them had come apart in midair, in clear weather for no reason anybody could find. By April 1954, every Comet in the world was on the ground and the certificate of airworthiness had been withdrawn. This was not a manufacturer quietly investigating a fault. An entire national industry had stopped. The aircraft meant to define British engineering for a generation was sitting on aprons, earning nothing, and there was no explanation to give anyone. Whatever the tank found would decide whether the Comet ever flew again. Consider what was at stake. First flight, July 1949. The first scheduled jet service in the world. London to Johannesburg. Ike in May 1952. 6 years before an American jet carried a fare-paying passenger. Journey times roughly halved. Cabins that cruised serenely above the weather, while piston airliners labored through it. Boeing and Douglas were nowhere. By the summer of 1954, the fleet was worth almost nothing. To understand the problem the investigators faced, you have to start with the evidence they actually had, which was 4 wrecked aircraft, and 3 of them led away from the answer. Because the Comet had not been having one kind of accident. It had been having several with entirely separate causes, and telling them apart was the first and hardest part of the job. Start with the 2 that were understood. In October 1952, a Comet failed to get airborne at Rome, and in March 1953, another was destroyed on takeoff at Karachi. Both came down to the same thing: pull the nose up too far during the takeoff run and the swept wing stalls, killing the lift exactly when it is needed. It was a handling trap rather than a structural one, and it was cured with a drooped leading edge. Genuine accidents. Wrong scent. Then Calcutta, the 2nd of May 1953. A Comet climbing out of Dum Dum broke up 6 minutes after takeoff and fell across the countryside in pieces. It had flown into a monsoon storm of extraordinary violence. The investigation concluded the airframe had been overstressed, either by the turbulence itself or by the crew fighting it. Nobody at the time thought that unreasonable. Aircraft did break up in storms of that severity. And then on the 10th of January, 1954, BOAC Flight 781 left Rome for London. The weather was clear. The aircraft was in a normal climb, passing somewhere around 27,000 feet. The captain was in the middle of a routine radio message to another BOAC aircraft when the transmission simply stopped. Fishermen off the island of Elba saw wreckage falling into the sea. There had been no distress call, no report of fire, no turbulence, and no warning of any kind. The fleet was grounded immediately. In the absence of any established cause, de Havilland and BOAC worked through a list of possibilities and modified against all of them. Fire detection and suppression, engine containment, fuel lines, control systems. Roughly 60 changes in all, none of them founded on evidence. All of them founded on the hope of covering whatever it was. On the 23rd of March, the Comet went back into service. It lasted 16 days. On the 8th of April, a South African Airways Comet, flying the same route out of Rome, was lost into the sea near Naples. The same phase of flight, the same clear conditions, the same absolute silence. No call, no warning, nothing at all. 2 aircraft, 3 months apart, had done exactly the same inexplicable thing, and the 60 modifications had made no difference whatsoever. What followed is one of the great pieces of engineering forensics. Responsibility went to the Royal Aircraft Establishment at Farnborough, under its director, Arnold Hall, and Hall made a decision that shaped everything after it. He refused to choose between the 2 obvious approaches and ran both at once. One team would recover as much of the Elba aircraft as could be lifted off the seabed. Another would take a healthy Comet and break it deliberately. take the first line of attack. The Royal Navy went to work off Elba in difficult water, and piece by piece the aircraft came up and was laid out at Farnborough on a wooden frame shaped like the fuselage. That let the investigators do something no photograph of a crash site allows. Read the order in which things had broken. And the first hypothesis it killed was sabotage. A bomb had been taken seriously, but the structure had torn outward from the cabin with no blast signature and no explosive residue anywhere on it. The second hypothesis was an engine. The Comet's 4 turbojets sat buried in the wing roots, which put a spinning turbine disc within a few feet of the pressure cabin. If a disc had burst, it could have gone straight through the cabin wall. It was a credible mechanism, and it fitted the suddenness perfectly. The recovered engines killed it. They came up essentially intact, with no sign of an uncontained failure. The third was fire. An airliner that stops transmitting mid-sentence and falls out of a clear sky is exactly what a fire in the air can produce. And the 60 modifications had largely assumed as much. But fire leaves evidence that seawater does not wash off. The recovered structure carried no soot, no scorching, and no heat distortion. Whatever had happened before anything burned. The fourth was the controls, or the crew. Both aircraft had been in an ordinary climb on a clear day, flown by experienced crews with nothing in the radio traffic to suggest either was fighting the airplane. And the reassembled wreckage settled it from the other end. The breakup had begun in the fuselage, not with anything a control failure would have done first, which left the investigation in an uncomfortable place. Every explanation anyone could put a name to had been examined and eliminated. There was no bomb, no engine failure, no fire, no loss of control, and a fleet of the most advanced airliners in the world was sitting on the ground because the aircraft was doing something nobody had a word for. So they went to the second line of attack, which is the one worth remembering. If the cause cannot be found in what is left of an aircraft that has already failed, then you take one that has not failed and you make it fail somewhere you can instrument it, photograph it, and watch. A Comet was withdrawn from airline service and delivered to Farnborough for exactly that purpose. An airframe that had already flown well over 1,000 times, which would matter more than anyone expected. The next decision is the elegant one. They needed to pressurize and depressurize a cabin thousands of times, but doing that with air would have been catastrophic. Compressed air stores an enormous amount of energy, and when a pressurized structure lets go pneumatically, it does so explosively, destroying the building and destroying the evidence the test existed to produce. Water is very nearly incompressible. It stores almost nothing. The instant the skin opens, it simply stops. So the fuselage was sealed inside a steel tank. The tank was filled with water, and the cabin was filled with water as well. Pumps then raised and lowered the internal pressure again and again, each cycle representing one flight from the ground to altitude and back down. The wings were worked up and down at the same time to reproduce flight loads. It ran continuously week after week, and somewhere past 3,000 cycles, the fuselage failed. It did not bulge, and it did not leak. It tore. A crack ran out from the corner of a cutout in the skin and traveled. And when the investigators examined the fracture face, they found what they had not found anywhere else. The fine parallel markings left by a crack that has grown a little at a time across thousands of separate loadings. Then they went back to the wreckage lifted off the seabed and found the same signature there. The answer was metal fatigue. The mechanism is simple to state and was, in this context, almost entirely unappreciated in 1954. A structure loaded well below the level that would break it in one go can still fail, provided the load is applied and taken away enough times. At any point where stress concentrates, a corner, a hole, an edge, a crack starts. Each cycle advances it fractionally. Eventually, there is not enough sound metal left, and what remains fails instantly. Now, in the tank, the corner that crack started from was the corner of a cabin window. That single detail is the origin of the version of this story you have almost certainly heard. That the Comet had square windows, that square windows concentrate stress, and that de Havilland ought to have known better. It is tidy, it is repeated everywhere, and it is the exact point at which the popular account parts company with the evidence. because when the investigators went back to the aircraft recovered from the sea, the origin was not a passenger window at all. It was traced to a cutout in the top of the cabin, an aperture for the direction-finding aerials, in a region of skin carrying high stress. The tank had shown them what kind of failure to look for. It had not shown them where it started on the aircraft that actually crashed. And there was a further layer underneath the geometry. The rivet holes around those cutouts had been punched, rather than drilled and reamed. Punching a hole in aluminium leaves a rough bore and, at the edge of it, microscopic cracks, which is to say a crack that has already started before the aircraft has ever flown. The shape of the opening mattered. How the holes around it were made mattered at least as much. So the comfortable version, they use square windows, is not merely a simplification. It is wrong in the specific way that lets everybody off. It implies an obvious mistake that any competent engineer would have avoided, which makes the disaster a failure of care. It was not a failure of care. The truth is considerably less reassuring than that. The windows were not square. They were rounded. And de Havilland did pressure test the fuselage before the aircraft entered service. They took a cabin section well beyond its working pressure without it failing, and concluded reasonably that the structure had ample margin. What they did, every other manufacturer also did. They tested for strength. Can it take the load? The test was not careless. It was the standard test of the era, and the standard test asked the wrong question. Nobody's certification rules asked how many times. And there was a reason nobody had learned to ask. No pressure cabin had ever flown high enough, often enough, to accumulate the cycles that would have exposed it. The Comet cruised at 40,000 feet, far above its predecessors, so it worked its structure harder on every single flight, and it flew a great many flights. It reached the failure mode first because it got there first. What replaced the old approach is the philosophy every airliner is built to now. It is called fail-safe, and later damage tolerance, and it starts from the opposite assumption. A crack will appear. So the structure is arranged so that when one does, it runs into something that stops it. Crack stopper straps built into the skin and multiple independent load paths so that no single crack can open a fuselage. Alongside it came the testing regime. Full-scale fatigue testing of a complete airframe, cycled to several times its intended service life before the type is ever certified, became a requirement rather than an option. And inspection intervals stopped being counted purely in flying hours. They are counted in pressurization cycles because that is what the Comet proved an airframe is actually keeping score of. Which leaves the part that usually gets left out of the tragedy. The Comet was not finished. A redesigned Comet 4, thicker skin, oval cutouts, drilled and reamed holes, opened the first transatlantic jet service in October 1958, 3 weeks ahead of the Boeing 707. It never recovered the commercial lead it had lost, but the airframe went on serving as the Royal Air Force's Nimrod until 2011. The aircraft that made all of that possible is the one nobody photographs. It never flew again after Farnborough. It spent its last working weeks inside a tank of water, being pumped up and down until it tore, so that a group of engineers could stand and look at a crack and finally give a name to the thing that had been bringing airliners out of a clear sky. Every pressurized aircraft you have ever boarded is safe partly because of what that one was made to do. If you enjoyed this story of flight, subscribe to Wings and Stories, new aviation history episodes several times a week.